Seyun has noticed a difference in her son Juan since he started attending a local preschool. Once friendly and forthcoming, Juan has become more hesitant around other preschoolers, almost nervous of the other children, though he still seems happy to play with them when they approach him. Given that she and her parents are immigrants, Seyun wonders whether speaking Korean at home or being among the few Asian Americans in her neighborhood has influenced the way Juan sees himself. She also wonders how living with his grandparents, who are stricter and more old-fashioned than other families in their neighborhood, has influenced Juan's perceptions of relationships and communication with others. Juan's self-conscious behavior has some benefits. He seems especially receptive to initiation from other children, and can play cooperatively when others lead the way. Seyun notices that her son is also less aggressive than some of the other children she meets, and she wonders whether that behavior is associated with her minimizing his screen time and access to violent cartoon shows. Seyun has several questions about this stage of development. How can she tell whether Juan's emotional development is on track and healthy? When will Juan develop an understanding of his racial or ethnic identity? Should a shy child be encouraged to take the initiative in social interactions more often? Does Juan need more time with peers or more time with family? This chapter will help you explore the social and emotional world of preschoolers, children aged 3 to 6. Megan is 3 years old and her family enjoys seeing her change. As she grows, Megan is starting to approach other kids and initiate play and make friends. It's exciting to see her introduce herself and talk about herself to new people, often saying, "Hi, I'm Megan, I'm this old," as she holds up 3 fingers. When Megan faces new challenges, like getting dressed or climbing into her car seat, she takes a big breath and focuses. Her family isn't sure where she learned this technique, but it helps her with persisting at the task. When she succeeds, she smiles knowing that she has achieved a new skill. Her family hopes that Megan will continue to be confident and outgoing as she gets older, but they're concerned. They've seen her older cousins become more self-conscious and withdrawn as they grow, and they wonder whether Megan will too. This section discusses how emotional and social skills develop during early childhood by considering children's ability to reflect on themselves, regulate their emotions, and respond to new experiences. Figure 6.2. Psychosocial Theory of Development, Initiative versus Guilt. Early childhood is a time when socializing becomes a bigger focus. Interacting with other children, with siblings, and with adults takes on new meaning and purpose. According to Erik Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, 1950, early childhood is the time when children navigate the unconscious conflict of initiative versus guilt. Erikson, 1985. This third stage of psychosocial development focuses on acquiring the self-confidence to reach out to others for help or social connection, as well as achieving the ability to do more things independently. It also builds on the previous stages, trust versus mistrust in infancy, and autonomy versus guilt in toddlerhood. At this stage, children may begin to take initiative by asking to do things themselves. For example, they may want to pour their own juice or pick out their own clothes. As preschoolers and young children begin to play and interact with others, some experience encouragement, success, and joy in taking the lead. Sharing toys, inviting others to play, and seeking out peers to spend time with might be rewarded by other children and onlooking adults through smiles or praise. When young children feel confident approaching others, they may develop a sense of initiative and feel comfortable leading and starting play interactions with others. A young child who experiences barriers in their interactions with others, such as being rejected by other children or discouraged by adults, or who feels shy or nervous, may develop a sense of guilt in these interactions. Set et al., 2019. If children are taught that it is rude to initiate or approach others first, they may become wary and unsure of how to begin social interactions, and instead wait for others to come to them. Whether a young child develops a sense of initiative or of guilt will influence the way they view themselves and others, as will others' emotional expressions and social dynamics. Luby et al., 2009. Caregivers can help to facilitate positive development towards initiative by attending to and responding to children's interests and desires for social connection. For example, if a 5-year-old asks to play with a friend but it's a busy week, the caregiver could reassure the child that they can have a play date next week and follow through in arranging the event. This will help the child feel more confident in their ability to seek out social opportunities. Similarly, if a child is struggling to figure out how to use their new car seat, empowering them to take responsibility and learn how to get situated alone will promote initiative. In contrast, criticizing them for taking too long might increase their feelings of guilt. So if they ask to pour their own juice, let them. but maybe have a towel handy in case of messes. After all, it's all part of learning and growing. Self-development and personality. At about age 3, young children do not yet have a strong sense of self. Although they can identify themselves in mirrors and photos, their self-concept is limited. Harder, 1999. The term self-concept refers to an abstract, cognitive idea of who you are, including all the beliefs you have about yourself. Typically, a self-concept for a 3-year-old will include basic vital facts, such as their name, gender, and age, and perhaps their relation to another person, such as an older sibling. In comparison, an 8-year-old will often include evaluative components such as hobbies they are good at, and psychological components such as personality traits. Around age 4, children may start to include new information in their self-concept, such as their interests and hobbies. One child may say they like Batman and coloring books, whereas another may mention dancing and the color yellow. However, at age 4, these components are based on concrete, factual statements and are not evaluative. Starting around age 5 or 6, some children might start to evaluate their skills internally, but expressing this view outwardly as part of their self-concept is still rare and will usually start later in childhood. Putnick et al., 2020. Although young children may not have the skills to reflect on and articulate their psychological individuality, their uniqueness is obvious to others. Biologically based patterns of behavior, known as temperament, can describe individual characteristics in a newborn, infant, and toddler. Refer to 4.2 Temperament and Personality in infants and toddlers. Often, temperament refers to outwardly observable actions, such as activity level, sensitivity, perceived emotional intensity, and perseverance. Goldsmith et al., 1987. Figure 6.3. Some young children prefer to sit quietly and work on puzzles, look at picture books, and avoid novel situations and loud places. Other preschoolers might prefer active play such as playgrounds and tumble mats, and may enjoy meeting new people and trying new food. By age 5, elements of personality begin to emerge. In contrast to temperament, personality contains more internal attitudes, cognitions, and preferences. Personality traits are also stable characteristics that appear across contexts. They are measured on a continuous spectrum, meaning it's possible to be high, medium, or low on any trait. Personality traits that appear in early childhood include components of the Big 5 factors. Figure 6.4. These 5 traits are openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Slobodskaya, 2021. Openness is a measure of someone's imagination and novelty-seeking behavior. Conscientiousness is the ability to pay attention and persist, and the desire for routines. Extroversion is the degree to which someone is either outgoing or withdrawn. Agreeableness is the tendency to comply and seek to please others. Neuroticism describes emotional stability, reactions, and range of emotions displayed. Children at this age are just beginning to develop a stable personality. This means their personality behaviors may shift between high, low, and moderate levels based on their environment and context. Roberts and Del Vecchio, 2000. For example, a child may appear moderate in extroversion overall because they are outgoing and outspoken at times, and shy and quiet at other times. A child who is moderate in conscientiousness may be neat and organized at times, but careless and messy at other times. Emotional development. Along with understanding who they are, young children begin to assess how well they perform certain tasks and skills at around ages 3 and 4. By this point, most young children base their self-esteem on the feedback they receive from their parents and caregivers. The term self-esteem refers to a personal evaluation of the self, expressing whether you hold yourself in high regard or feel critical about yourself. Children who experience love, support, and encouragement from their parents tend to develop relatively high levels of self-esteem in early childhood. 2 important factors in the development of self-esteem are social comparisons and self-conscious emotions. Social comparisons. High self-esteem influences the way young children make social comparisons. That is, the way they evaluate themselves in comparison to others. When asked whether they perform better than, worse than, or about the same as other children when it comes to running, coloring, singing, or dancing, most 4-year-olds rate themselves as performing better than others. Marsh et al., 2002, Orth et al., 2018. The reason is that at 4 years of age, most children are not yet able to fully consider the performance of others to make objective comparisons. Instead, they are most familiar with their own perspective and performance, and being satisfied with their abilities, they rate their own skills highly. Around 5 years of age, children start to become more self-conscious and are better able to evaluate and assess the way they are perceived by others. In many countries, including the United States, this coincides with the beginning of formal education. In a school setting, children may start to notice that some children are better at different activities, and perhaps they themselves are not the fastest or the best at everything. In the first year of formal education, children tend to experience an adjustment to their self-esteem, leading them to place less reliance on praise from parents and more on the social comparisons they make with other children. Pinto et al., 2015. It is typical to see self-esteem decline a little in the first year of formal education as children begin to have more realistic perceptions of themselves. For example, they may transform from believing they are the highest jumper ever to observing that they jump about as high as their peers in physical education class. Self-conscious emotions. The development of new self-conscious perceptions around age 5 is accompanied by more mature self-conscious emotions. Although toddlers may experience guilt, shame, and sympathy, young children begin to display and express these emotions in culturally appropriate ways. For instance, parents in some regions of Nepal ignore their children when they display shame, whereas other Nepali parents respond with support and help. Children in these areas learn from parental behavior, and this influences future displays of this emotion. Cole et al., 2006. Girls in Hungary are less likely than boys to receive encouragement from their mothers to feel and display pride, which may decrease future expressions of pride in girls. Poharnuk and Lang, 2021. Moreover, early childhood is a time when children start to think about their emotions and reflect on them. Thinking about our internal emotional state is an aspect of metacognition, or thinking about thinking, including about our memory, cognition, and emotions. Reflecting on a behavior that made us feel guilty, dwelling on how nervous we are around others, and considering the way a friend's struggle is making us feel are all new experiences in early childhood. These self-conscious emotions are aided by improved self-regulation, which is the ability to lower our emotional arousal and control our emotional reactions. In infancy and toddlerhood, self-regulation typically requires assistance from a caregiver to help redirect attention, relax, and lower arousal. Boyer, 2023. However, by early childhood, children are starting to experience neurological maturity, which aids in the development of new social and cognitive skills, including the ability to self-regulate. For example, a preschool-age child with strong self-regulation skills is likely to use words to describe their feelings rather than have a tantrum, and to ask for help when they need support with a challenging task. The ability to consider long-term goals in addition to short-term pleasure is called impulse control. A particular early childhood milestone in impulse control, achieved between ages 3 and 6, is the ability to delay urges and desires. In one classic study, a single marshmallow was placed in front of children who were told they could eat the sweet immediately, or wait until a researcher returned, in which case they could have 2 marshmallows. Although most 3-year-olds ate the candy immediately, most of the 6-year-olds were able to control their desire and double their reward. Michel, 2014. Self-regulation and impulse control rely on many cognitive skills, such as controlling and directing our attention, planning and identifying goals, using our working memory, and applying calming coping techniques. McClelland and Cameron, 2011. Although these competencies are interrelated, it is possible for a child to be further along in their development of some and lagging in others. Montroy et al., 2016. In other words, all children will develop these skills on their own individual schedule, and being strong in one skill does not guarantee having strength in another. Along with regulatory skills, social skills also foster improved impulse control in early childhood. Children who are better able to understand the perspective of others, anticipate the needs of others, feel empathy, and communicate effectively are often better able to make the social compromises and negotiations required when playing games with others. Robson et al., 2020. Taken together, all these skills are considered to be components of emotional intelligence, or the ability to understand and react appropriately to the emotions of ourselves and others. Table 6.1. Parents and other caregivers can play an essential role in promoting emotional intelligence and emotion regulation in children. Adults can model and encourage healthy development through emotion coaching, which supports emotion development, rather than by dismissing or disapproving. Emotion coaching strategies include paying attention to and recognizing a child's emotions and emotional expressions as learning opportunities, listening to and validating their emotions with empathy and kindness, and helping children identify and regulate their emotions. Gottman, 2024. In contrast, emotion dismissing and emotion disapproving approaches dismiss, deny, or are negatively judgmental of a child's emotions, which can lead children to struggle with developing healthy emotion regulation. All in all, emotion coaching parenting techniques have been shown to promote higher emotional competence in children, Perry et al., 2020. Does inhibition correlate with school success? You may have heard about the famous 1970 marshmallow test conducted by Michel and colleagues. In this test, researchers placed one marshmallow in front of a young child and then left the room. Children were given two options: eat the marshmallow right away, or wait until researchers returned and be rewarded with a second marshmallow. The researchers found that younger children were more likely to gobble up the sweet immediately, but older children were more likely to be patient and let their reward double. This finding speaks to the development of inhibitory control. But as charming as the original study was, its findings were soon taken out of context and overgeneralized. Theorists wondered whether children who were more patient would go on to have more self-control and self-discipline in other aspects of their life. Interpretations of the data and the findings were used to suggest that children who waited for the second marshmallow would be more successful in school, at work, and even in relationships. In 2018, a group of scientists re-examined the long-term outcomes of the so-called marshmallow effect and found much smaller and insignificant correlations between delay of gratification and later outcomes. Watts et al., 2018. More recently, a group of researchers compared these studies and found that while delay of gratification was positively correlated with later achievement, the reality is much more complicated. Falk et al., 2020. The choice of eating the marshmallow right away or waiting was much less closely associated with later developmental outcomes. What's potentially more important is to consider the dynamic environment the child experiences, which includes other factors that promote achievement and self-regulation, such as family background and early cognitive ability. 50 years after the first study, these misinterpretations have been corrected. So if you're tempted, just go ahead and eat the marshmallow. Social development. A young child's emotional development doesn't take place in the absence of outside influence. As you recall from Bronfenbrenner's ecological model in 1.4 Contexts and Settings of Development, children are embedded within family systems, communities, cultures, and geographical regions. As they grow from 3 to 6 years of age, their social domain becomes increasingly complex, with more interactions with peers, extended family, daycare and preschool settings, and media, such as television, music, and personal digital devices. Family structures that provide space for emotional expression and growth can help to foster positive emotionality and resilience. Children who develop a sense of confidence and pride are more likely to engage in group play behavior with their peers and to have a healthy outlook on relationships. In comparison, children who experience neglect, abuse, or discouraging home environments may be more likely to be timid, unsure, or aggressive around other children, and they may face further discouragement and discipline in preschool settings. Set et al., 2017. However, an optimal family environment depends on many factors, such as cultural values, parents' skills and personalities, and children's personalities. As mentioned in 4.2 Temperament and Personality in Infants and Toddlers, goodness of fit is the degree to which a child's temperament and skills match their environment. A loud, active, and argumentative child may flourish in a home in which parents encourage healthy debate and banter, whereas a quiet, sensitive, and introverted child may thrive in a quiet home with parents who nurture their needs with gentleness. Social emotional development and autism spectrum disorder. Social and emotional development in early childhood tends to follow some common trends. However, these trends are not universal, and the many exceptions include the developmental trajectory of children who experience neurodiversity, that is, who have a brain that works differently. The term neurodiversity describes any psychological, emotional, cognitive, or sensory experience that is different from that of the majority. Children who are deaf, hard of hearing, blind, or visually impaired are considered neurodiverse. Language delays, movement and motor delays, and intellectual disability are also examples of neurodiversity. One group of neurodiverse preschool children who may struggle with social initiation in preschool years are those with autism spectrum disorder. Scufu, 2019. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by persistent deficits in social communication and social interaction, and restricted repetitive patterns of behavior. American Psychiatric Association, 2022. ASD occurs in around 17% of children and can manifest with a wide range of highly diverse symptoms and neurological characteristics. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 2024. The average age to receive a diagnosis is 4.5 years old, though many individuals are diagnosed at later ages, including in adulthood. Brett et al., 2016. Some of the common traits that appear in early childhood are struggles with social interactions, particularly making eye contact, responding reciprocally, understanding the perspectives of others, and communicating verbally. These noticeable differences in social interactions among autistic preschoolers often result in parental concerns and referrals to specialists. Figure 6.6. Note that most psychologists use the phrase autistic preschooler, identity first language, as opposed to person with autism spectrum disorder, person first language, because a large percentage of allies and advocates in the autistic community have stated this language preference. The language and preferences for any neurodiversity or disorder vary by the individual and the represented community. When in doubt, always follow the lead of the person or ask their preference. Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, ND, Ladau, 2021. Consider Leo. He was 3 years old when his parents first noticed something was different about him. Though he reached all the early infant and toddler milestones as expected, he never really learned to speak, preferring to make expressive noises and use nonverbal body movements. In addition, he had become fascinated with analog clocks and watches. He would stare at the large grandfather clock in the hallway for long periods of time. Most recently, Leo has started to understand daily routines and desires a rigid routine based on the clock. When it reads 7 o'clock, Leo will pull his mom to his bedroom and groan and insist on being put to bed, sometimes when it's 7 a.m. and not 7 p.m. However, the behaviors and characteristics often associated with autism may be better explained by other conditions. For instance, a young child who focuses intensely on their toy trucks and prefers to play alone and with the same truck toys each day might simply be a young mechanic in the making. Another child who struggles with basics of language such as tone, pronouns, and sarcasm might be learning English as a second language or have a language processing disorder. Finally, a child who does not want to be touched, talk about their feelings, or tell stories might be shy, socially withdrawn, or reacting to certain cultural expectations. Parents should always refer to specialists, rather than making their own diagnosis. Intersections and contexts. Supporting neurodiversity. Autism spectrum disorder is often first diagnosed in early childhood, and many families struggle to access resources, assistance, and interventions to help their children better cope and navigate the world around them. For more than 60 years, the leading approach has been applied behavioral analysis, ABA, a rigorous technique of rewarding desired behaviors and coaching children in social, motor, and linguistic development. Today, many colleges and universities offer ABA training programs, and autism resource centers can be found in most urban and suburban areas. Behavior analysts trained in ABA work with detailed precision to help children improve verbal communication, eye contact, and social reciprocity. The Behavior Analyst Certification Board, BACB, is one of the organizations that provides information about current ethics for practitioners of ABA and standards for certification. Behavior Analyst Certification Board, 2020. For many families, access to ABA services has been important, but ABA has been criticized by many advocates of neurodiversity, Lord, 2023. Earlier forms of this therapy also included punishment and a focus on eliminating unfavorable behaviors, rather than fostering skills. Though this is no longer the case, ABA can remain rigid and strict. In addition, the commitment and the hours can be exhausting, for practitioners and children alike. But perhaps most importantly, this therapy encourages conforming to society's expectations of what is typical, which may not be the best fit for an autistic child's needs or specific neurodivergence. This encouragement to mask someone's natural way of being may be considered oppressive, problematic, and harmful. Although the benefits of early ABA therapy include improved cognitive, social, and language skills, McDonald et al., 2014, there is growing concern over the goals of this therapy and whether its focus should remain on fitting in with society's expectations. Leaf et al., 2021. Do you know anyone who has experienced ABA therapy, either as a client or a practitioner? Could this therapy be revised or adjusted to address critics' concerns and be more empowering? Or should society change to better embrace neurodiversity? Beyond early childhood, those with autism spectrum disorders may follow unique developmental trajectories. Though ASD is lifelong, some children develop skills like those of their non-autistic peers, whereas others may continue to struggle with particular social and emotional expectations across the lifespan. Elder et al., 2017. Noelle is starting to watch her family members to better understand herself and the world around her. As a 5-year-old, she knows that she is a girl, and someday she will grow up to be a woman just like her mother. She is also learning that sometimes women and men do some things differently. For instance, she likes to wear sparkly shoes, and so does her mom, but her dad does not. She likes to sit and watch her mom put on makeup, and she looks forward to wearing makeup herself someday. But Noelle also knows there are some ways in which she is more like her dad. She has tightly coiled curly hair and a dark complexion like her father, whereas her mom has naturally straight light hair and a fair complexion. Her dad is usually better at styling her hair, and in family photos she looks more like her dad. In Noelle's neighborhood, there are a lot of people with different hair and skin colors, but she's noticed that within each family people tend to look similar. She feels unique because the people in her family look different from each other. This section will explore gender, racial and ethnic identity development in early childhood. Gender development. By early childhood, most children can identify their gender, which is often congruent with their biological sex assigned at birth. As you may recall from 4.1 Autonomy and Sense of Self in Infants and Toddlers, biological sex describes the physical, anatomical, genetic, chromosomal, and hormonal components that help us describe ourselves as male, female, or intersex. Gender refers to the psychological, social, and cultural elements that allow us to describe ourselves as a boy, a girl, or a person outside the gender binary. In this section, we'll consider topics related to gender, including gender identity development, gender socialization, and two important contexts for gender: peers and the media. Gender identity development. According to gender schema theory, young children are regularly watching the world around them to better understand gender roles, expectations, and forms of expression. By age 3, most have reached the first milestone described in this theory, which is the ability to label their gender, in most cases as girl or boy. BEM 1981, BEM 1983. Two additional milestones are typically met during early childhood. At approximately age 4, children acquire gender stability, which is the understanding that, for most people, boys grow up to be men, that girls grow up to be women, and that gender is a stable concept. However, at this age, it is also common for children to assume that temporary changes in appearance, actions, or social roles can alter someone's gender and change gender stability. For instance, they may think a girl who cuts her hair short is now a boy, or that a boy who practices ballet has become a girl. By age 6, near the end of early childhood, most children reach the third and final milestone, gender constancy, which is the belief that gender is resilient across contexts and situations, and immune to superficial changes like altered hairstyles or clothing and violations of gender expectations. Though these three realizations about gender are normative markers of gender development, individual differences, and the diverse environments children experience will somewhat influence the age at which they are reached. Martin and Rubel, 2010. During the preschool years, children have very rigid understandings of gender and can often be strict enforcers of gender expectations and gender norms. They tend to prefer same-gender peers to play with at preschool and daycare centers, and they are very observant and ready to call out children who act, dress, or behave in ways that break cultural gender stereotypes. This behavior is not due to malice or discrimination, but rather to young children still developing cognition and their limited environmental experiences. At approximately age 5, children become proficient at understanding games and following rules, and they initially see gender performance as a set of rigid rules that cannot be broken. Figure 6.7. As neurological and cognitive development continue, and as children gain more social experiences in the world, they begin to understand nuances in rules and become less judgmental and enforcing of gender norms. When children reach age 6 and understand gender constancy, their belief in the rigidity of gender norms starts to ebb. Along with this new cognitive milestone comes more leniency in their gender expectations. Although they still maintain a preference for same-gender play, children may be more accepting of gender diversity, particularly if they are exposed to examples in the media or in preschool and family life. For example, they may start to realize that short or long hairstyles can be for anybody, and that lots of children can enjoy dance and ballet. Gender socialization. Children do not develop a sense of gender in isolation. Often, the greatest influence in early childhood comes from family members and caregivers, as children infer differences between them as being due to gender. That is, if dad washes the dishes and mom mows the lawn, they assume dishes are boys' work and lawn care is for girls, even if the division of labor is a factor of skills, preferences, or schedules. These patterns and observations are highly similar across children in gay, lesbian, and heterosexual families. Boss and Sanford, 2010. Goldberg et al., 2012. Children will use the expectations of gender to which they are exposed early in life to guide them moving forward. The way gender influences chores, clothing, play preferences, and behavior expected from others will go on to shape the way they navigate and respond to others and themselves. Often children are treated differently by their parents, based on their perceived gender. Murawska, 2020. For example, girls are rewarded for being more cooperative, submissive, empathetic, and domestic, whereas boys are rewarded for being more assertive, brave, strong, and active. In families in which division of labor is unconventional, counter-stereotype, or more egalitarian, children internalize this portrayal of gender roles and may have more egalitarian views of gender than children raised in more traditional homes. While all parents tend to influence gender socialization and development in their children, heterosexual mothers and fathers tend to do so in different ways. Mothers are more likely than fathers to respond to children based on their personality, skills, and interests, whereas fathers are more likely to enforce gender stereotypes. Dyke et al., 2014. In addition, fathers are more likely to encourage independence and courage in their sons, but dependence and caution in their daughters. In single-parent families, children are likely to develop their gender roles from both their parent and their external role models, such as teachers and family friends. Chen et al., 2024. Parental socialization of gender also varies by ethnicity. Brown and colleagues, 2015, found that fathers of both white and Native American children tended to show more negative emotions than mothers did when children deviated from gender norms in emotion socialization. But mothers and fathers of Black children had more supportive reactions. Point 1. Gender and peers. In addition to the family, young children learn much about gender from siblings and same-age peers. Often, daycare and preschool settings offer chances for children to observe how boys and girls vary in terms of clothing, interests, personality, and behavior. Children's typical preference for same-gender playmates in early childhood encourages behavioral homophily, or group similarity. Often a new interest, clothing style, or game that is popular among same-gender peers will become a coveted novel form of expression and a mechanism for group cohesiveness. Consider Maggie, for instance. When she was 3, her brother James was 6. James was interested in all things superhero, and so was Maggie, until she started preschool. After 2 weeks of preschool, Maggie made friends with a group of girls who all enjoyed playing with toy ponies, and she also became fascinated with ponies and disinterested in superheroes. Although children with one sibling of a different gender are more likely to play with counter-stereotypical toys, Kachirko et al., 2021. Peer interactions in preschool also have a major impact on gender socialization. Kohlmeyer et al., 2018. Because preschoolers tend to view the rules of gender much like the rules of a game, the influence of same-gender peers on play preferences and stereotypes is potent. Caregivers who attempt to refute the gender rules endorsed by peers may find this an unrelenting task. Gentle reminders and introductions of exceptions and caveats can help young children to gradually learn more flexibility. For instance, if a 4-year-old insists that stripes are worn by boys and polka dots are worn by girls, a parent who decides to wear the counter-stereotypical design can gently challenge the child's assumptions. Gender in the media. Finally, a powerful source of gender socialization in early childhood is the media. Although parents and caregivers often curate some of the media to which children are exposed, such as by selecting films, video games, and technology, children are constantly bombarded with color-coded advertisements and shopping aisles filled with gender-specific products and subtle nods to gender norms that parents may miss. Figure 6.8. In the 1990s, hyper-gendered marketing emerged, promoting many products that had not previously been gendered, but were now available in feminine and masculine versions. Moss, 2009. These included children's hygiene products like toothbrushes, electronics like video recorders and telephones, and stationery supplies such as staplers and paperclip dispensers. The trend continues, with gendered advertising on social media sites that targets girls and boys with different styles, messaging, and products. Azmi et al., 2021. These advertisements may have indirect or direct influences on gender socialization, given that they may be seen by parents, relatives who buy presents, or by the children themselves. But not all media influences are as innocent as directing consumers to a certain color. Sociologists and media experts have identified trends in characters and gender roles in children's media. Historically, girl or women characters have been scripted as submissive, domestic, or motherly, with very little opportunity to display leadership, analytical skills, or humor. Boy or man characters have often been portrayed as stoic, brave, and competitive, with few exceptions who show compassion, vulnerability, or nurturing. Sharafadine et al., 2020. As well as reinforcing traditional gender roles. Children's media often portray characters in hypermasculine and hyperfeminine extremes, in terms of body types. Boys and men are shown as muscular and athletic with deep voices, such as Maui from Disney's Moana, Buzz Lightyear from Pixar's Toy Story, and Captain America from Marvel's Avengers. In comparison, girls and women are typically portrayed as thin, with hourglass figures, perfect makeup, and lustrous hair. Examples include Jasmine from Disney's Aladdin, Elastigirl from Pixar's Incredibles, and Wonder Woman from DC's Justice League. These exaggerated depictions in children's media may influence young children to aspire to look and behave like their heroes, a goal that is unobtainable. Inclusive depictions of gender. In recent years, more diversity has emerged in characters and gender roles in children's media. Girls and women have been depicted in more nuanced ways, such as Tinkerbell, who is a fairy and an engineer, a superhero named Kim Possible who defies gender stereotypes, and Raya, the Disney princess who sword fights and saves her world. Inclusive depictions of boys and men have been slower to emerge, but some examples include Aang from Avatar, The Last Airbender, who is empathetic, joyful, and kind, Gonzo from Muppet Babies, who enjoys wearing dresses at times, and Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, who shows endurance, cooperation, and grit rather than relying on aggression. Children's media are also starting to show more diversity in terms of gender. In Pixar's 2023 film Elemental, one character named Lake was described as non-binary. Other non-binary characters in children's shows include Kazi from The Dragon Prince, Double Trouble from She-Ra, and Angel Jose from Craig of the Creek. Racial and ethnic identity development. Along with gender development, early childhood also includes important milestones in understanding our own racial and ethnic identity. A broad set of theories used to describe these stages is ethnic racial identity development, and the first milestone children reach in this framework is often ethnic labeling. Umana Taylor et al., 2014. Ethnic labeling is the process of assigning labels to yourselves and others to describe racial, ethnic, or cultural status or nationality. The labels a child uses will be influenced by their surrounding culture. In the United States, labels may identify racial groups such as black and white, and ethnic groups such as Latin or Arab. In New Zealand, labels may include racial groups such as European, Asian, Maori, and Pacifica. In Nigeria, these labels may include ethnic groups such as Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo. The second milestone in early childhood is typically the acquisition of ethnic knowledge, with which children begin to understand, organize, and compare information about different groups. This process can be as simple as learning about different food, clothing, and holiday traditions from around the world, or as complex as understanding racial prejudice, stereotypes, and discrimination. Figure 6.9. Finally, around the age of 6, children start to develop a sense of ethnic constancy. As with gender constancy, they begin to understand that their racial and ethnic identity is a stable trait that does not fluctuate based on clothing, food, or situation. For instance, a child learns that attending a Lunar New Year celebration at a Chinese community hall does not mean they themselves become Chinese. At this point, children understand that their racial and ethnic identity will carry on throughout their life. The understanding of racial and ethnic development in young children is informed through considering racialized identities and parental racial-ethnic socialization. Racialized identities. The development of racial and ethnic identity varies depending on the groups to which children belong. Ethnic groups that have been historically marginalized or given little power or resources are referred to as racialized. Children who identify with a racialized group are often more aware of racial stereotypes, discrimination, and differentiation than children who identify with non-racialized groups. Most research in the United States has focused on comparing racial knowledge among Black and white children. For example, as a racialized group, Black children tend to be more aware of racial stereotypes than white children. Essien and Wood, 2021. Young children begin to show in-group preference or partiality for playmates of similar racial and ethnic background to themselves, though such choices may vary by the child's environment and other influences. Ikura et al., 2021. Moreover, they start to understand stereotypes about various ethnic groups, and they will often remember information and examples that are consistent with stereotypes and forget what is in conflict with them. For racialized children, this process can include being influenced by harmful and limiting stereotypes. The development of ethnic and racial identity has many positive outcomes for racialized children. In addition to facilitating understanding and differentiating between groups of children, it can help develop positive associations with communities, leaders, art forms, and hobbies, and foster a sense of belonging. For instance, being included in and celebrating heritage can encourage a sense of emotional fulfillment, inclusion, and purpose. Umana Taylor et al., 2014. Parental racial ethnic socialization. From early in life, parents provide implicit and explicit information about their beliefs and values concerning ethnicity. Figure 6.10. This information often concerns two main themes. First, parents provide information about pride and heritage. Activities such as cooking together, listening to music, sharing language and stories, visiting museums, and connecting with grandparents contributes to children's understanding of their heritage and can help them find pride in their race and ethnic identity. This type of racial ethnic socialization is typically positive and is connected with developing better social skills, academic outcomes, and mental health. Hughley et al., 2019. Why is teaching colorblindness problematic? Starting in the 1960s, around the time of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, some white parents began to teach their children to not see race, or to be colorblind. The intention behind this approach was to be egalitarian, to promote equality, and to treat people of all races the same way. Although many white individuals still consider this a viable strategy for promoting equal rights, research over the past 5 decades, Mueller 2017, has shown that colorblindness merely makes those from privileged backgrounds blind to their privilege and blind to the discrimination that others face. Assuming everyone is the same, regardless of race, ignores the impact society has had on marginalized individuals, and it assumes that marginalized individuals see and experience things the same way a white person does, which is not the case. More recent anti-racist trainings have recommended a different approach. Rather than attempting to not see race, people are taught to acknowledge the oppression that has occurred, and to learn and read about other ethnicities as much as possible. For parents, this process can mean bringing their children to an Afro-Caribbean festival, going to a storytime reading session about immigrant families at the local library, and learning some Spanish phrases from their Latin friends. It also includes listening to racialized communities and standing with them in solidarity when they need support to speak out against injustice, such as by showing up at rallies and protests and signing open letters demanding equity. Parents and families also pass along information about biases and stereotypes. This process can include teaching racialized children about the history of discrimination and self-preservation. For example, a family may teach their children about police brutality if they experience a traffic stop while driving together. Anderson et al., 2021. Both racialized and non-racialized children can also learn mistrust, bigotry, and prejudice. However, parents who attempt to teach their children anti-racist thought and to identify and oppose racism have been found to be effective at reducing discrimination and in-group preferences in them. Heberle et al., 2021. Media influences on race and ethnicity development. Portrayals of characters of color in children's media matter for all children. Representations of racial and ethnic minorities have historically been limited to harmful and problematic stereotypes. In addition, the focus on white and European characteristics in children's media has had negative impacts on Black children's body image, particularly with regard to weight, hair, and ideals of beauty. Montel, 2020. This negative impact has been seen in children of other marginalized identities as well, including Asian American and Native American children and youth. Chen et al., 1999. Sunday, 2002. Overall media representation has gradually improved, but still relies heavily on cultural stereotypes and tokenism. Tokenism occurs when a character is presented in a one-dimensional light, as though their race, ethnicity, gender, or disability represents their entire personality and contribution to a plot. Tokenized characters often interact with other, more multi-dimensional characters who are not defined solely by their demographic characteristics, further reinforcing racial tropes and discouraging the view of minoritized individuals as vibrant and multifaceted. Although representation of girls of color has improved in recent years with Disney characters such as Tiana from The Princess and the Frog, Moana from Moana, and Mirabel from Encanto, representation of Black boys and men in children's media has lagged. As of 2023, some nuanced examples of Black boys and men in children's media include Craig of the Creek, Ezran from The Dragon Prince, and Bo from She-Ra. Henry's parents Lionel and Jerome love him very much. They're always fussing over him and trying to make him happy. As a 4-year-old, Henry can be demanding. He loves cupcakes and asks for sweets constantly, so Lionel and Jerome always end up buying decadent desserts on grocery day. They love Henry's big smile and his happy squeals. However, after the cupcakes, Henry has a hard time winding down for bedtime. A warm bath and comfy story time still don't do the trick, so one of his dads will cuddle him and sing lullabies until eventually Henry drifts off. It can be tiring, and sometimes Henry falls asleep only late at night. This routine might all need to change once Henry's younger brother has a say. Benny is only a week old, and already he is altering the way his parents respond to Henry. A newborn needs constant attention, so Henry has been left to entertain himself more. But so far, he is excited about his baby brother and enjoys helping his dads find the burp cloths and clean diapers. It's exciting for Lionel and Jerome to see how their family dynamic is shifting with its newest member. Like all new parents, Lionel and Jerome will provide a variety of experiences for their children. Their parenting styles will affect their family, as will their cultural practices. The choices they make regarding discipline will also have an impact, as will the relationships between individual family members. For example, Benny and Henry will have their ups and downs as siblings, and the quality of Jerome and Lionel's marriage, and whether it lasts or ends, will also loom large. Let's consider how these various familial contexts affect early childhood development. Parenting styles. Young children rely on their parents and caregivers to help them with daily tasks, such as feeding, dressing, and self-care. As they grow and learn to navigate social interactions with others, children often use their relationship with their parents as a guide. Each day, parents model how to communicate, encourage, play, learn, and cooperate with others. Mundane tasks like household chores, errands, and bathing teach children about responsibility, collaboration, and social roles. The way a caregiver provides structure, feedback, and emotional support for a child is often called a parenting style. Parenting styles. The way parents influence the social development of young children was first studied by Diana Baumrind, who identified 3 unique approaches to parenting based on their degree of warmth and structure. Baumrind, 1966-1971. These parenting styles differ in the levels of strictness and warmth shown to children. McCoby and Martin, 1983. See Figure 6.11. One of the original 3 styles identified by Baumrind, 1966, was authoritarian parenting and is characterized by a high level of structure, meaning the parents provide boundaries, rules, and discipline to their children, but also a low level of warmth. These parents can be described as taking a rules-focused approach. They prioritize having their children follow rules and obey adult directions. Authoritarian parents are less likely to negotiate with their children and instead direct and demand, without leaving room for compromise. A metaphor for the authoritarian parent is the brick wall. It is firm and has no give, which reflects how such a parent might be inflexible and uncompromising. Children of authoritarian parents may become wary around authority figures and hesitant to speak up for themselves when there are misunderstandings, or they may become more likely to rebel as they grow older. However, in some situations, a strong protective figure may be helpful. The term authoritative parenting refers to a more democratic, less rigid, and more gentle than authoritarian parenting. In this second parenting style characterized by Baumrind, parents take a relationship-focused approach in which they provide a moderate to high level of structure for their children, but also a high level of warmth and emotional support. Authoritative parents are more likely to talk things out with their children, model communication and conflict resolution skills, and offer explanations for their rules and disciplinary practices. A metaphor for the authoritative parent is a drum. It is firm but also flexible, which reflects the way such a parent is responsive and reactive to the needs of their child while still providing boundaries. Children of authoritative parents tend to develop skills related to compromising, coping, and understanding the needs of others. Haslam et al., 2020. Baumrind's third parenting style is permissive parenting, and describes parents who display high levels of warmth but low levels of structure. These parents often take a child-focused approach to making decisions and navigating conflict. They often prioritize ensuring their child's happiness by providing rewards, stimulation, and praise, and avoiding discipline and punishment. They are less likely to refuse their child's requests, and often relax their own guidelines to fit the child's preferences. A metaphor for the permissive parent is gelatin dessert. It is highly moldable and movable without a defined shape or form, representing how such a parent will change themselves to please their child. Children of permissive parents may struggle to form compromise and conflict resolution skills, Tavasoli et al., 2016, particularly because they are accustomed to having things their way. A fourth parenting type, uninvolved parenting, was not identified by Baumrind but was added by McCoby and Martin, 1983. This style is characterized by low structure and low warmth. Uninvolved parents tend to provide little attention, discipline, or support for their children and take a parents-focused approach. They often prioritize their own experience, with little regard for the child, which is why this parenting style is sometimes referred to as neglectful parenting. Sometimes uninvolved parenting arises due to unforeseen circumstances, like major medical, economic, or domestic concerns that are beyond a parent's control. Sometimes parents are struggling with mental health concerns, addictions, or substance misuse. Other times they are just disengaged, perhaps due to an unwanted pregnancy or custody placement. A metaphor for an uninvolved parent is a ghost, someone who is often absent in their children's lives. Children of uninvolved parents grow up with little guidance and are at risk of forming negative coping strategies, behavioral patterns, and developmental outcomes. Predictors of parenting styles. Parenting styles describe parents' behaviors, of course, but they may arise from bidirectional interactions with other family members. For example, a parent or caregiver is often stricter with one child and more lenient toward another. This difference could be based on the children's temperaments, perceived genders, or other factors. A child who attempts to push boundaries may influence a parent to provide more structure. A child who is anxious and nervous may lead a parent to show more warmth and encouragement. Figure 6.12. Moreover, parenting styles can shift as adults grow and develop. Younger parents may start as permissive and grow to take on more authority. Conversely, parents with high expectations may adjust their standards and relax their demands as they grow older. Further, many children grow up with more than one caregiver and may experience different parenting styles from each. Infant caregiver attachment style may also influence parenting styles. In 4.4 Social Development in Infants and Toddlers, you learned about the infant attachment styles called secure, insecure avoidant, insecure ambivalent, and disorganized. A parent who has a secure and close relationship with their child might be more likely to talk things out, provide rationales, and demonstrate an authoritative style. In comparison, a parent who has a more strained relationship with their child may choose to discipline and criticize their child as a main mechanism of influence. Finally, a parent who has an overly clingy and dependent child may attempt to use gentle encouragement and reward. Additional parenting styles. The 4 parenting styles discussed so far were identified along the axes of warmth and structure. A third axis of support for autonomy was discussed by Klein and Fay in 1990. Autonomy is our sense of independence and control over ourselves. Parents who display a high support for autonomy often allow their children to try new challenges, take on new responsibilities, and overcome their own obstacles. Robichaud et al., 2020. Parents who exhibit low support for autonomy may prevent their children from facing hardship, readily solve dilemmas for their child, or interfere in common daily tasks. Parents with especially low support for autonomy have been labeled helicopter parents because they hover over their children, intrude inappropriately in their daily lives, and prevent the development of conflict resolution and coping skills. Other names for this parenting style are steamroller parents and snowplow parents. These parents anticipate upcoming obstacles and clear the path so their children do not encounter any friction or hardships. Allowing children to resolve minor inconveniences, conflicts, and challenges has been shown to have developmental benefits. Children who are permitted to work through their own obstacles are more likely to gain a sense of resilience, self-efficacy, and positive social skills. Children who rely on their parents to monitor and interfere may be more dependent, nervous, and anxious in new situations. Neubauer et al., 2021. Overall, children benefit best in an environment that provides high levels of warmth, structure, autonomy, and stability. Culture and child rearing. Parenting does not happen in isolation. Rather, it's embedded within a culture and tied to cultural values. Figure 6.13. Most early research on parenting and child development focused on Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, weird cultures, thus studying white middle-class families in the United States, Canada, and Europe. Evaluating theories about child development for their cultural robustness adds value to our understanding of and study of human development. For instance, Baumrind's theory of parenting styles often suggests that authoritative or democratic parenting is the most advantageous. However, in studies of children growing up in urban high-crime areas, some researchers found that strict and authoritarian parenting may be an adaptive approach to reducing some risky behaviors. Clark et al., 2015. For children in higher-risk environments or of lower socioeconomic status, having an authoritarian parent in early childhood was once thought to lower the risk of delinquency, criminal activities, and heavy drinking later in adolescence by providing protection from neighborhood stressors. However, more recent research has suggested that strict and harsh parenting is not necessarily the optimal strategy, and that high levels of warmth and parent-child knowledge may be more effective prevention and intervention strategies for youth across classes, races, and ethnicities. Clement Galarza et al., 2022. Moen and Schroeder, 2018. Pinquart and Kauser, 2018. Rubinov and Boyce, 2017. Villarejo et al., 2024. Support for autonomy may be advantageous for parents who are raising children in individualistic cultures in which self-responsibility and independence are valued. However, for parents in China and Korea, the use of control and boundaries tends to be a better predictor of positive child outcomes, such as social-emotional competence and academic achievement. Yim, 2022. This may be due to cultural emphasis on collectivism, or the upholding of group well-being over individual well-being. Indeed, a large study, Dieter-Deckert et al., 2011, that investigated the role of individualism and collectivism on parenting styles in 9 countries, found that these cultural values played a large role on the extent to which parents prioritized control and/or warmth in caregiving for their children. Figure 6.14. Motivation, discipline, and initiative. Raising young children often means responding to their behaviors, words, and feelings in a way that will shape their future behaviors. Nearly every caregiver response has an impact on children's motivation and understanding of the world. B.F. Skinner, 1938, was the first to describe these responses in detail as consequences in his theory of operant conditioning. Consequences follow a behavior and are either encouraging or discouraging. A consequence that encourages a behavior is known as a reinforcement, such as a smile, praise, or a new toy. A consequence that discourages a behavior is known as a punishment, such as a stern look, a scolding, or a timeout. Notably, a consequence that encourages behavior in one child, like an apple, might discourage the same behavior in a different child. Overall, reinforcement is a more effective and efficient strategy in shaping children's behavior than punishment. Teaching what to do and rewarding it adds information and knowledge for children, as opposed to teaching what not to do, which subtracts knowledge. Reinforcement encourages neurological synaptic growth, or the fostering of new connections in the brain, whereas punishment relies on synaptic pruning, or the suppression of neurological associations, which requires much more effort. Moreover, reinforcement allows caregivers and children to maintain a happy, calm, supportive interaction that encourages learning and listening. When children are upset, irritated, or frustrated, they are less able to learn new information, positive reinforcement, and rewards. Although reinforcement tends to be effective, in some situations, it can undermine children's motivation. Reinforcement works best when it is novel and unexpected, and less well when it has become routine. It is also most effective when delivered immediately, such as praise and a hug given immediately after a chore has been completed, and not an hour later or at the end of the day. Finally, reinforcements should be small and intangible, such as praise, body language, and attention, rather than large and tangible like toys, food, money, or stickers. Much of the time, children are happy to receive small tokens of encouragement rather than large gestures. Although tangible rewards can help motivate a child to start a new behavior, such as putting away their toys at the end of the day, they don't help to sustain the behavior over the long term. Rather, intangible rewards, along with feelings of pride, confidence, and connectedness with others, are the leading motivators for sustaining long-term habits. In several studies between 1979, Loveland and Ali, and 1999, DC et al., children were divided into 2 groups and asked to draw and color pictures. In one group, children were offered no tangible rewards, only praise and encouragement from researchers. In the other group, children were offered money for each picture completed. Children who were offered no tangible rewards spent more time on their pictures, colored and drew in more detail, and showed higher levels of pride, contentment, and joy. In comparison, children who were paid completed more pictures, but they did so more quickly and used less detail. Moreover, children in this group displayed lower levels of joy and pride in their work. These experiments demonstrated that offering a tangible reward for a behavior that otherwise would be motivating in and of itself can actually compromise and decrease motivation. Figure 6.15. A tangible reward like money is a form of extrinsic motivation, or an external reason or consequence for a behavior. In comparison, drawing a picture for its own sake carries intrinsic motivation, an internal reason for completing a behavior because the behavior itself brings joy, a sense of accomplishment, or connectedness. Intrinsic motivation is linked with long-term motivation and the formation of healthy habits. Punishment and discipline. Although reinforcement tends to be more effective than punishment, there are situations in which punishment may be more appropriate. For instance, if a child is performing a dangerous act and is at risk of harm, a parent's intervention to discourage future dangerous behavior is warranted. Much like reinforcement, punishment can be an intangible response such as a facial expression, verbal comment, or body language. And it can also be tangible, such as penalties, chores, or the removal of privileges. When a child's behavior is punished or disciplined, it is optimal to offer the punishment immediately after the behavior, so children can clearly understand the connection between their behavior and the consequence. It is also best for the caregiver to have a healthy, positive relationship with the child and to remain calm but firm. If the parent or caregiver becomes frustrated or upset, this emotion will escalate the situation and decrease the likelihood that the child will learn from the punishment. Life hacks. Don't fall for the reinforcement trap. Children are highly responsive to reinforcement and punishment, and sometimes caregivers are unaware of how their responses can shape children to become more stubborn and argumentative in the future. Imagine a parent is grocery shopping with their preschooler, who wants a colorful candy. The parent does not want to give the child the candy, due to its cost, poor nutritional value, or any other reason. A 3-year-old may respond by crying, pleading, stomping their feet, and having a full-blown tantrum in the grocery store. If the parent responds to the tantrum by giving in and allowing the child to have the candy, they are reinforcing and encouraging future tantrum behavior. If the parent gives in after 2 minutes, that teaches the child they need to protest and cry for at least 2 minutes in the future, so they will start to have tantrums that last 5 minutes in length. If parents give in after 5 minutes, the next tantrum could be even longer. So how should a parent respond to this situation? Well, if you want to discourage your child from acting out in public and using tantrums to win arguments, you will need to take a deep breath and endure the tantrum. This means not caving and giving in, but also not escalating the situation by yelling or becoming upset yourself. Staying calm, cool-headed, and patient while ignoring the onlooking grocery shoppers is the best long-term solution. You could also try simply distracting the child with a silly question, such as, "What do you think a mix between a walrus and a unicorn would look like?" Or talking to them about the yummy dinner plan for the evening. Distraction can be an impressive tool for many difficult parenting moments. Regardless of which of these techniques you choose for not reinforcing the tantrum, the child will calm down and realize they cannot win arguments or candy this way. They still might find alternative approaches to persuading you they need a sweet treat in the future, though. For punishment to be most effective, the penalty should also be logical and match the behavior it is discouraging. Natural punishment is what happens when a caregiver does not interfere and lets nature take its course. For instance, if a child is stacking chairs, climbs on them, and falls off, the natural punishment is the physical pain and discomfort from falling off the chairs. For safety reasons, however, natural punishment is not always ethical, safe, or moral. Logical punishment results when a caregiver intervenes and responds to a child's behavior in a way that offers a rational consequence for their behavior. Mageau et al. 2018. For instance, a young child who throws their juice will need to help clean it up, and a child who pushes another will need to say they are sorry. Often, logical punishment helps children to understand connections as well as cause and effect, and may need to be applied only a small number of times. Logical punishment is more effective than illogical punishment, which is a penalty that does not conceptually fit a targeted behavior. Examples may include yelling at a child who spills juice, spanking a child who draws on a wall, or sending a child who is overly loud from excitement to an extended timeout. These uses of illogical punishment might frustrate the child and teach them not to do these behaviors, but it will likely require more trials and attempts to successfully discourage the target behavior. In some cases, use of illogical punishment does not discourage a child from performing the undesired behavior, but rather teaches them not to be caught doing it, and may negatively affect their trust for and relationship with their caregiver. It depends. Are timeouts logical? When spanking decreased in popularity as a child disciplinary technique, timeouts began to rise to ubiquity. However, they are not the ideal response to all childhood misbehaviors. When used correctly, timeouts can allow an overwhelmed child to calm down and find time to regulate. Timeouts are also beneficial and logical when they are connected conceptually to the undesired target behavior. For instance, if siblings are fighting and the chance of someone getting hurt is increasing, a timeout can help de-escalate the situation, remove children from a potentially harmful situation, and eliminate their opportunity to hurt another person. Timeouts are also effective when caregivers check in with children afterwards to discuss the behavior and why calming down was important. However, in some daycare and home settings, timeouts can be misused and overused. Timeouts would be an illogical punishment choice for a child who will not eat their vegetables, clean their room, or get dressed for school. In these situations, removing the child and letting them escape their obligation may reward and reinforce their disobedience. Timeouts are also less effective when the child is given no explanation or teachable moment to help them learn more desired behaviors, when timeouts are excessive in length, or when the child is left without follow-up or supervision. James, 2020. Corporal punishment. One type of discipline that relies on the use of bodily control is corporal punishment. Corporal punishment is physical punishment and can include things like slapping the back of a child's hands, restraining a child, and spanking or hitting a child. Spanking or hitting a child's backside with an open hand, a belt, a switch, a wooden paddle, or another object was relatively common for many years. In 1975, more than 85% of households surveyed said it was a main discipline or punishment technique. Starting in the 1980s, spanking started to decrease in popularity, with verbal discouragement, timeouts, and the ignoring of problematic behavior gradually increasing as strategies. As of 2017, spanking was still used in an estimated 37% of U.S. households. Mayhews and Patrick, 2021. Finkelhor et al., 2019. Many individuals who are spanked develop healthy relationships with their parents and are not abusive as adults. However, this positive finding cannot be credited to spanking. In fact, research has found no direct association between spanking and positive outcomes. Compared to children who were not spanked by their parents, children who were spanked display more aggressive and disruptive behaviors and have slower vocabulary development in early childhood. Gershoff and Grogan-Kaler, 2016. As outlined in Table 6.2, several research studies have consistently found use of corporal punishment to be highly associated with a range of negative outcomes for children. Starting in 1979, Sweden made spanking and corporal punishment illegal. In 1990, the United Nations passed the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which 196 countries have ratified, more than have signed on to any other human rights treaty. United Nations, 1990. In addition, 72 countries have passed legislation to make spanking and corporal punishment illegal. The only United Nations member state that has not yet ratified the rights of the child is the United States. Spanking also remains legal in the United States, despite advice from the Academy of American Pediatrics and the American Psychological Association that states corporal punishment is ineffective and leads to more defiance, aggression, and risk of child abuse. AAP 2018. Glixman, 2019. Child abuse and neglect. Despite being illegal in more than 100 countries, corporal punishment in isolation is not considered child abuse. However, much of the research indicates that it has negative outcomes highly similar to those of child abuse, and that young children have similar negative responses to both. Gershoff and Grogan-Kaler, 2016. Child abuse is drastic, harsh treatment that compromises and undermines the healthy development of a child. Child abuse can take several forms, including physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. Norman et al., 2012. Physical abuse includes the intentional bodily harm and injury of a child, often as an act of intimidation, punishment, or frustration. Sexual abuse is the inappropriate touching, photographing, or disrobing of a child. Emotional abuse consists of unrestrained and severe yelling, tormenting, intimidating, controlling, or demeaning of a child. Finally, neglect is failure to provide the necessities of life or the support to flourish and develop healthfully, and it can include physical neglect such as withholding food, shelter, new clothing, and hygiene products, or emotional neglect such as withholding attention and love. Young children between the ages of 3 and 6 years old who are experiencing abuse or neglect are more likely to act out at daycare or preschool. They appear overly tired, strained, or worn out, and have difficulty playing with same-aged peers. They also may cry more frequently for unexplained reasons. Table 6.3 presents the prevalence of abuse in the United States as a percentage of the population aged 0 to 17, though it should be noted that many researchers believe that child abuse and neglect are still underreported. Masuyo et al., 2023. Children who experience maltreatment are at elevated risk for emotional problems such as anxiety and depression, and behavioral problems such as ADHD, conduct problems, and aggression. Moreover, children who experience abuse and neglect are more likely to struggle academically, cognitively, and with interpersonal relationships. Over the lifespan, child abuse and neglect are related to increased prevalence of psychological disorders, such as bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, PTSD, and substance abuse. Felitti et al., 1998. Morris and Hayes-Grudo, 2023. Finally, long-term stress associated with child abuse increases the risk of inflammatory physical diseases such as heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and some cancers. Lippard et al., 2019. Broadly speaking, early childhood traumatic experiences, whether from abuse, unstable home environments, unsafe environments, or natural disasters, can increase multiple child development risks. However, early intervention and support can foster resilience in children regardless of the type of adverse experience. National Child Traumatic Stress Network, 2024. Maston and Barnes, 2018. In most regions of the United States and Canada, child abuse and neglect can be reported by calling Child Protective Services, CPS. CPS is an organization that includes social workers who can meet with families and help provide resources to prevent further abuse. Services include access to counseling, anger management classes, addiction services, unemployment services, housing and shelters, and food banks. More than a third, 37.5%, of households with children between the ages of 0 and 17 experience a visit from Child Protective Services in the United States. Kim et al., 2017. In many countries, healthcare and educational professionals are required to report suspicions of abuse and neglect, but they may encounter barriers to reporting, miss signs of abuse, or feel that they lack appropriate training to confidently report concerns. Gubbles et al., 2021. Perigo et al., 2023. A common misconception is that CPS seeks to remove children from their parents in all cases. However, social workers are trained to use removal as a last resort only, and often keeping families together in a safe situation is the main goal. Moreover, family separation for Indigenous and racialized children is known to be problematic. Indigenous children make up 50% of those in foster care in Canada, despite being only 5% of the population. Newland, 2021. Influence of siblings. Siblings are often our first peers and offer many interactions to help us develop our social, emotional, and cognitive skills. Figure 6.16. Sibling interactions begin from birth, but they become much more intense, intimate, and rewarding once both siblings are able to communicate verbally. Whether older, younger, or the same age, like twins or triplets, siblings can be biological relatives who share one or both parents, step-siblings, adoptive or foster siblings, or close cousins. Research on siblings is highly difficult because their age difference can range from 9 months to more than 19 years, influencing the types of interactions they will have with each other. In this section, we'll discuss the benefits and drawbacks of sibling relationships, of different family sizes, and of birth order. The benefits and drawbacks of siblings. Having a sibling in the home during early childhood has been associated with increased opportunities for play, support, and emotional bonding. A sibling who is close in age, within 5 or 6 years, can offer companionship in new situations, healthy challenges in learning conflict resolution and communication skills, and knowledge about the world. Younger siblings tend to observe their older siblings and are quick to learn behavioral skills such as self-feeding, dressing, and outdoor play. Older siblings also benefit and show higher levels of empathy, perspective-taking, and leadership from mentoring their younger sibling. Barreri et al., 2023. However, sibling conflict and sibling rivalry are exceedingly common. Observational studies in young children's homes find about 8 conflicts per hour. Tucker and Finkelhort, 2015. Siblings often tease, jeer, and taunt each other, share sarcastic, cynical, or contemptuous facial expressions, and push, pull, and physically control one another. Although sibling conflict may be alarming, most of the time it allows for healthy relationship development. Intense emotional distress and risk of physical injury tend to be rarer than other forms of sibling conflict, but caregivers need to know their children and understand when to intervene to ensure their safety. Sibling rivalry tends to decrease if siblings have complementary temperament styles and better communication skills, if both receive love and attention from their parents, and if parents do not have an explicit favorite. Family size. Sibling relationships become more complex in larger families. Overall, families with fewer children tend to have more financial resources, time, and attention to dedicate to each child, whereas larger families with more children tend to have fewer resources, but more rules and more requirements for each child to contribute to chores and household duties. Blabake et al., 2020. Although children in larger families do not receive as much one-on-one focus from their parents, they receive more companionship and interactions from their siblings. Figure 6.17. Children without siblings often engage in much more interaction with parents and other adults, and less with same-age peers. Although some believe that single children are spoiled and lack development in empathy, sharing, and conflict resolution, research has not supported this description. Instead, single children tend to have high levels of empathy and kindness, self-esteem, and achievement. Goises et al., 2023. Those with access to same-age peers through daycare or preschool often also show high levels of social competence, friendliness, and conflict resolution skills. The one area in which single children may struggle is communication with other children, because they may be more familiar and comfortable with speaking to adults. Birth order. Sigmund Freud's contemporary and colleague Alfred Adler was the first psychologist to hypothesize about birth order effects, which are personality and behavioral characteristics assumed to derive from being the oldest, middle, or youngest sibling in a family. Adler, 1964. According to Adler, the oldest child is more responsible, conservative, achievement-driven, and leader-like. The middle child or children are thought to be emotionally withdrawn, jealous, stubborn, and avoidant. The youngest child is a good-humored, fun-loving entertainer who lives for the moment. Although birth order has been linked with academic achievement, with younger siblings less likely to attend post-secondary education, research indicates that this may be an effect of parent-child quality time rather than birth order. Price, 2008. Older siblings may benefit from having more individual attention from their parents before their next sibling is born, and later children may lack that advantage. Booth and Key, 2009. Overall, empirical research on birth order effects has not supported the birth order theory. This may be due to the complexity of studying siblings. To conduct large-scale scientific research, researchers would need many families with a similar family structure, perhaps 2 married parents and 3 children under the age of 18. However, the gender and age of the siblings, the age differences between them, whether they were biological, step, or adoptive siblings, and whether they lived together full-time or part-time, would also influence the findings of the study. Families are so incredibly diverse that leading experts in the area have commented on how difficult it would be to find any evidence for birth order effects. Divorce in children. Around 30% of children live with a divorced, separated, unmarried, or remarried parent. Anderson et al., 2022. Divorce is likely to increase stress among caregivers and children, create financial strain, and decrease the amount of time children spend with their caregivers. Children of divorce are more likely to experience anxiety, disruptive behaviors at school, and lower academic achievement for 2 years following a parental separation. Morales et al., 2021. Divorce is particularly likely to affect children's outcomes when they are old enough to understand the seriousness of the situation, but still young enough to depend heavily on their parents for daily caregiving, meal preparation, and transportation, typically between the ages of 7 and 14. Baker and Ben-Ami, 2011. Several factors influence a child's well-being during a divorce. Children who are more prone to worry, have anxious temperaments, or blame themselves are more at risk of adverse outcomes. In addition, parents who actively blame their ex-partners, who rely on their children for emotional or financial support, or who put the children in the role of mediator, have been found to make the separation process more distressing for children. Figure 6.18. Table 6.4 considers both protective and risk factors. However, not all divorces are equal. Divorce may be beneficial to child well-being if it helps reduce exposure to abuse, domestic violence, disruptive and unhealthy communication patterns, or unhealthy parent-parent relationships. Children may also endure their family separation better if both parents remain active in their lives, explain to them in an age-appropriate way that the divorce was not the child's fault, and do not compete for love or put the child in the role of a mediator. Allowing a child to process their emotions in an age-appropriate way is also beneficial to their well-being. The shift from a dual-parent to a single-parent household will likely increase the financial and time strain experienced by families. Financial strain comes from the pressure to provide housing, food, clothes, and recreational activities within a family's new and often constrained economic means. That is, even if both parents are financially supporting children after divorce, which is not always the case. They may bear the added cost of paying for 2 homes and 2 sets of utility bills. Divorced mothers are at particular risk for financial strain. They are 3 times as likely to live in poverty as married couples. Bayaz Öztürk, 2018. Time strain refers to stresses on the amount of high-quality, one-on-one time that children can spend with their parents and caregivers. Divorced parents who may be required to work extra hours, take a second job, or perform all domestic labor themselves report feeling exhausted and unable to meet their children's emotional needs at times. Unlike those in dual-parent households, for instance, divorced and separated parents do not always reliably have a teammate to help them pick children up after school or bathe them while dinner preparations are underway. Divorced parents may find support by asking extended family members, neighbors, friends, and other single parents to help provide a care network. When grandparents, other divorcees, or friends can help with childcare, errands, or daily tasks, they can ease the time strain and even the financial strain experienced in divorced families. It just keeps happening. Laura's caregiver grandparents have received yet another phone call from her daycare center, saying she has been disruptive, vocal, aggressive, and disobedient. They've been warned that if Laura doesn't calm down and comply with instructions, she may be dismissed from the center, and they'll need to find new childcare. Laura's grandparents are trying to teach her positive play behaviors like sharing and taking turns, but their sweet baby has grown into a frustrated, explosive 4-year-old who easily becomes overwhelmed by the world around her. They hope that it was just a phase, but the daycare director insists that Laura's behavior is unusual and possibly indicative of long-term aggression. Laura's grandparents decide to face this head-on. They see their family doctor, modify Laura's diet, set an earlier bedtime, reduce screen time, provide more active sports outlets, and take her to play groups on the weekend to help foster better communication and social skills. They hope this will work out eventually, but they know for now they are taking the advice of experts and doing as much as they can. In this section, you'll learn how young children begin to navigate their social world of peers and friends, and develop the necessary skills to form lasting social bonds. Peers and friendship. After parents and siblings, peers are the largest socializing agent in young childhood. Peers are children who are similar in age, or in terms of their cognitive, physical, and emotional development. They are children's everyday acquaintances, their neighbors, their classmates at daycare and preschool, and other children they meet at playgrounds or play centers. Learning how to interact with peers is different from learning to interact with older siblings or adults. Children often need to initiate play, communicate in age-appropriate ways, and make compromises such as sharing and turn-taking. A unique type of peer is a friend. In developmental research, a friend is defined as someone you enjoy being around and look forward to seeing again, and who feels the same about you. Thus, a friend is a peer with whom a child has developed a mutual affection and emotional attachment. Figure 6.19. Friendships are rewarding. They offer companionship, emotional support, and opportunities for cognitive, social, and emotional development. Friendships in development. Though the formation of friendships evolves as children grow and mature, at all ages it is based on proximity and similarity. The term proximity refers to the circumstance of living, schooling, or vacationing near each other and on a similar schedule so there is time to socialize. The degree of similarity or resemblance needed for friendship varies by developmental age, but can be based on a match of physical characteristics, interests and hobbies, or emotional temperament. Children enjoy meeting people with similar physical and demographic characteristics. Thus, friend selection in early childhood is typically based on superficial similarities, such as favorite color, street address, or the letter of a child's first name. Outcomes of friendship. Forming friendships in early childhood is enormously beneficial. Children who have more opportunities to play with friends tend to develop cognitively in terms of perspective taking, emotionally in terms of empathy and compassion, academically in terms of motivation and achievement, and even physically in terms of gross motor development, from having more opportunities for outdoor play. Table 6.5 shows how benefits of friendship in early childhood extend across all major domains of development. Play in early childhood. Early childhood often marks the beginning of friendships that will change and grow over time. It is also a time of play, which fosters holistic development in all domains. Children begin to develop preferences for whom they play with and how they play, and they may have imaginary friends. Figure 6.20. As you learned in Chapter 5, Physical and Cognitive Development in Early Childhood, ages 3 to 6, Parton's work on social play shed light on its value in fostering social skills and relationships. Parton, 1932. Social play, such as associative and cooperative play, helps children develop communication skills, emotional regulation, and conflict resolution skills. Parton also found it an essential component in forming and maintaining friendships. For preschoolers, unstructured or child-led play is particularly important. Hauser et al., 2016. It teaches children to take turns, share, and cooperate with others. They learn to express their emotions and navigate social situations. Wang, 2022. Play preferences. Although all types of play can appear from ages 5 and onward, different children have play preferences that describe how they prefer to spend their free time. One type, structured play, often consists of organized games, crafts, songs, and activities led by teachers and parents, during which children follow along. Another type, free play, happens in unstructured time during which children can select their own activity, such as during a school recess, in an after-school play center, or on the playground. During free play, when children are surrounded by same-age peers, they are better able to play in ways they most prefer. Some children may prefer to play with other children during free play. This could include playing one-on-one with another child in a dyad or group of two. Overall, girls tend to select dyadic play more often than boys do. A pair of children may spend their free time talking, passing a ball, or doing a puzzle together. Social play can also include large group play by 3 or more children. Groups can spend their time playing a physically active game such as tag or pretend and dramatic play. Boys tend to gravitate towards large group play more often than girls do, but large groups can be mixed gender as well. Hanish et al., 2023. Life hacks. Can adults play? Just like young children, adults can have a preference for play behavior. Perhaps you like to go out dancing with friends, or perhaps you'd rather stay in and read a book. Maybe you'd like to go out dancing, but you're anxiously waiting for an invite from others. Just like children, adults can be social or introverted and shy. Regardless of your age, play is beneficial for all. Sometimes adults worry they will be judged for playing, but consider the play they may already enjoy. Have you ever finished a jigsaw puzzle or a craft all by yourself? That's solitary play. What about sitting next to your best friend? Independently scrolling on your phones or reading for pleasure? That's parallel play. Have you ever attended a painting class or a crafting workshop in which you shared materials with those around you but made your own piece? That's associative play. Finally, have you ever played an enthralling and competitive board game with others? That's social play. We develop play skills early in childhood and continue to use them throughout our lifespan. Thus, if a child asks you to play, before you say no, consider your shared interests and play preferences. Perhaps you can kick a ball back and forth outside, or engage in pretend play with dolls. If you aren't sure what to say, consider belting out some of your favorite song lyrics, or just follow the child's lead. Most children thrive on play and interaction, so as a bonus, you're helping boost their healthy development while you get to be silly too. For some children, free play is an opportunity for solitary play, and they may spend their time with puzzles, skipping ropes, books, or blocks. Solitary play is considered beneficial and adaptive because it has a constructive goal and allows for the development of new skills. A preference for solitary play is very different from social reticence, in which a child is alone and not engaged in an activity. A socially reticent child may just wander a playground, watching others play but not doing anything themselves, or they may sit idly waiting for free play to be over. Social reticence is not considered adaptive because there is no obvious goal, though if infrequent, it is not problematic. During one episode of free play, the same child may engage in dyadic, group, and solitary play, as well as socially reticent behavior. Over time, children who spend more time in group or dyadic play tend to be more social and outgoing. Children who spend more time in solitary play tend to be more introverted or low in extroversion, and children who spend more time displaying socially reticent behavior tend to be more anxious, socially rejected, and immature in terms of social-emotional skills. These relationships are likely bidirectional, in that we choose play environments that fit our preferences and personalities, and are also shaped by our play environments. As in many areas of developmental psychology, our environment and our individual selves interact to shape our long-term development. Imaginary friends. Some children may not engage in social play, but enjoy having an imaginary friend. Early theorists were concerned about imaginary friends and believed they were a sign of social ineptness, immaturity, or other developmental problems. However, empirical research has found the opposite. Arma and Landers-Potts, 2021. Children who have an active imaginary friendship tend to be higher in social competence, communication, and empathy. Gleason, 2017. Aggressive behavior. Prosocial skills do not come automatically to some children, who instead gravitate toward aggressive strategies in socializing with peers and friends. In early childhood, most aggression is physical and consists of purposeful harm or intimidation of harm toward people or property. It can have various causes, predictors, and outcomes. Causes of aggression. Not all physical aggression has the same cause. Sometimes a child can be physically aggressive when overstimulated, frustrated, or reacting to a stressful situation. At other times, a child may want to achieve a goal, such as regaining their toy from another child, delaying going to bed, or avoiding eating a disliked meal. Aggression can be targeted or not, and a child can be either the instigator or the reactor in an aggressive situation with a peer. Figure 6.21 offers a breakdown of the unique dimensions of physical aggression in childhood. Any combination of characteristics from across the two columns is possible. For instance, aggression can be hostile and targeted, or a child can be both antisocial and the reactor. Some children display high levels of hostile, reactive, untargeted aggression due to a lack of adaptive coping strategies. Teaching them social skills, relaxation techniques, and communication skills can help to decrease frequency and intensity of aggressive behavior. For other children who display instrumental, targeted behavior and who are commonly the instigator or attacker, other long-term interventions may be necessary, such as family therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy. Physical aggression tends to peak in early childhood, at about the age of 2 or 3, and to decrease as children start to develop stronger self-regulatory skills. However, in some children, high levels of physical aggression persist through adolescence and even beyond, predictors of aggression. As you learned earlier, some aggression is normal for all children in early childhood. However, in some this aggression may be persistent or exist at a high, maladaptive level. Such maladaptive aggression is typically a result of a complex set of predictors including the environment, genes, and epigenetics. That is, the influence of environment on gene expression. Palumbo et al., 2018. In addition, aggression is associated with family size and maternal age. Parents who had their first child at a young age, and families with more children, are more likely to have aggressive children than parents who had their first child at an older age and have fewer children. In addition, parental stress levels, parental substance use, and parental hostility are major predictors of aggression in early childhood. Lee et al., 2022. Finally, children often learn aggressive behaviors from watching and mimicking family members. A parent who resolves conflict by yelling, slamming doors, or using corporal punishment is more likely to have a young child who displays aggressive behaviors. Stover et al., 2016. For some children, but not all, physical aggression can also develop in response to peer interactions, as with reactive aggression. Children who are not accepted or are actively rejected by their peers, or who form friendships with other aggressive children, may be more likely to become aggressive over time. Tutofi et al., 2012. Children who belong to a friendship group of several aggressive children are more likely to bond and find companionship in being aggressive, and to reward each other for being aggressive. Finally, aggression may arise from temporary and situational stress. Children who are experiencing stress at home, such as marital conflict or divorce, and children who are struggling at school may be more likely to display aggression. Children who have undiagnosed learning disabilities, communication problems, or sensory sensitivities may be more likely to display aggression to deal with their frustrating situation. The relationship between exposure to aggression and later expression of internalizing and/or externalizing problems in childhood is a highly individualized process. Reinches et al., 2010. Schuler et al., 2018. Outcomes of aggression. Aggression is a concern to parents and teachers because it is linked with elevated risks for a variety of negative developmental outcomes. Children who are highly aggressive for a persistent length of time throughout their childhood are more likely to fall behind academically, to struggle to develop healthful and adaptive social-emotional skills, have strained relationships with parents, siblings, friends, and teachers, and feel intensely angry and hostile toward the world around them. Severe aggression in young childhood is also linked with delinquency, school suspension and expulsion, and criminality in adolescence. Stover et al., 2016. Social withdrawal and shyness. On the playground, some children might be pro-social and others aggressive. Still, others may avoid interactions completely. This third type of children's social skills is observed among those who socially withdraw from interactions with others due to feelings of shyness or anxiety, or an interest in their own solitude. The term social withdrawal describes the removal of yourself from the peer group and avoidance of peer interactions. Neither shyness nor social withdrawal is the same as antisocial behavior, the approach avoidance model. According to the approach avoidance model, children may have high or low motivations for approach and avoidance. The approach motivation represents a child's desire to play and be with others. Children who prefer to play alone have a low approach motivation, and outgoing and highly social children have a high approach motivation. The avoidance motivation represents the child's desire to avoid negative evaluations or peer rejection. An anxious or fearful child has a high avoidance motivation, and a calm, confident child has a low avoidance motivation. Using combinations of the approach and avoidance motivations, we can identify 3 types of social withdrawal: introversion, avoidance, and shyness. Figure 6.22. Introversion describes children who prefer to play alone and are happy to engage in solitary play. Avoidance is characteristic of children who withdraw from peers because they have been victimized or rejected from the peer group. Finally, shyness describes children who have both high approach and high avoidance. Although they would like to play with others, they are fearful about how others may judge or perceive them, or too nervous to invite themselves. Shyness tends to manifest on a playground in hovering and onlooking behavior. Children who have high approach and low avoidance are social. Predictors of shyness. Shyness has biological components, such as faster resting heart rate, increased vagal tone, activity in the vagus nerve in the chest, heightened levels of the stress hormone cortisol, and increased breathing rate. Shyness is also tied to family factors, such as maternal anxiety and negative self-talk. Gunter et al., 2020. Young children who hear their parents worry a lot and express concerns about pleasing others are more likely to develop feelings of shyness. Volbrecht and Goldsmith, 2010. Finally, children who perceive ambiguous situations as dangerous or threatening are more likely to be fearful of social situations. Hummel et al., 2017. That is, shy children are more likely to judge neutral faces as being angry than their non-shy peers. This can be based on the child's temperamental shyness or on early exposure to threatening and adverse events. Gross, 2002. Feelings of shyness tend to increase when children experience novel situations, are in intensely social situations, become the center of attention, or are being formally evaluated. Many children experience shyness at the start of a new school year when they are interacting with new classmates and a new teacher and adjusting to new academic expectations. For most children, this shyness subsides after a few weeks of school. But for some extremely shy children, feelings of anxiety and timidness persist throughout the school year. Outcomes of shyness. Feeling shy around others can inhibit the development of friendships, prevent children from practicing and using their social skills, and foster a sense of isolation and loneliness. Although moderate amounts of shy behavior can be healthy and typical, extremely shy children may experience a low sense of belonging, a high level of anxiety, and increased feelings of peer rejection. Jarcho et al., 2019. Though shyness is likely to vary across cultures, in those that value group-oriented goals, it is less likely to pose any risk. Chen, 2019. Yu et al., 2020. Addressing feelings of shyness and offering interventions by partnering shy children with more outgoing peers, teaching social skills, and offering cognitive behavioral therapy are all valuable strategies. Pro-social behavior. Early childhood is a time of budding social skills. The term pro-social behavior refers to cooperative, assertive, and socially competent interactions with others, such as helping, sharing, being kind, inviting others, and showing concern. Figure 6.23. Children who display pro-social behavior often have good self-regulatory skills. That is, they can identify their emotions, they are able to calm themselves down when they are upset and frustrated, and they have developed adaptive coping strategies. Moreover, such children tend to show high levels of empathy. Warden and McKinnon, 2001. Empathy requires both cognitive skills, such as perspective taking, and affective components such as emotional concern. Finally, children who are more pro-social tend to show high levels of cooperation. Cooperation is the ability to work with others both altruistically to help them and assertively to help yourself. And it is neither passive and submissive nor dominant and aggressive. Children who are prosocial tend to have parents who demonstrate and model prosocial skills. Parents who explain the rationale behind their expectations and who model self-regulation, conflict resolution, and effective assertive communication techniques are more likely to have prosocial children. However, children's temperament can also influence the development of their prosocial skills. Those who are lower in reactivity, are higher in approach, and have greater positive affect are more likely to display prosocial skills. Prosocial behavior is linked with a variety of positive developmental outcomes, such as happiness, friendship, and academic achievement. Vanderstorm et al. 2022. Sanjay is obsessed with a cat game on his tablet. In the game, he can make a cat meow, talk, wave, and giggle. He is regularly found on his app making cat noises and giggling at the funny cat responses. His stepmother has noticed that he'd rather play his cat game than play outside, go to the park, or cuddle for story time. Sanjay is about to turn 5 and still does not know his alphabet, so his stepmother downloads a new alphabet learning game onto his tablet. She shows him how to play it once or twice and hopes that he'll be encouraged to play. But Sanjay shows no interest in the educational game. He'd rather just play the cat game and make noises. His stepmom is wondering what her next step should be in trying to help him to develop pre-literacy skills. Sanjay's experience is not unusual and illustrates the importance of considering media diet and exposure in this age group. Media diet. For as long as humans have lived in civilized societies, we have consumed media. In ancient times, this consisted of folklore, legends, and plays. In the industrialized era, media consumption included newspapers, radio, and early photography. By the 1980s, children's media included brightly colored picture books, cartoons on television, and songs by children's artists. Today, children consume 100 times more media imagery than previous generations could, from streaming shows to apps and games on their tablets to songs and trivia on home smart speakers. Hockey 2019. A media diet is the information to which people are exposed via mass media outlets such as television, music, video games, and electronic devices. Media diets include intentional exposure, such as the specific online videos children choose, and unintentional exposure, such as advertisements that pop up on a smartphone game. They can also include passive content that might not be noticed immediately, such as background music in a shopping center, and more active content that grabs our attention, such as a flashing strobe light advertising products on a billboard. In 2011, a national survey indicated that young U.S. children tend to watch 2 hours of television per day and spend about 1 hour playing video games. Common Sense Media 2011. 10 years later, in 2021, young children's media consumption had increased to 3.5 hours per day, and their options had diversified to include smartphones, video on demand, and online streaming. Figure 6.24. However, most children's media experts recommend that preschoolers should consume only 1 hour of high-quality educational programming per day and spend no time on any other type. Children and media exposure. In much the same way that observation of parents, peers, and siblings teaches children about the world around them, media exposure shows children the social norms and values of their culture and their world. Images on television are captivating, song lyrics are catchy, and characters in children's media can be inspiring, so children pay attention, encoding and retaining what they see and hear in the media. Exposure to screens and electronic devices can both stunt and spur child development in certain circumstances. Children's early language skills tend to develop best when they are interacting with other people face-to-face. Young children who spend too much time watching screens may not experience the beneficial interactions with their caregivers that help with facial recognition, language development, and social-emotional intelligence. If television is being used as a babysitter and a substitute for high-quality time with caregivers, then this screen time is associated with children lagging in their cognitive and social-emotional development. Children who spend extremely large amounts of screen time viewing content that is high in aggression may be more likely to display aggressive and disruptive behavior, hyperactive behaviors, and poor self-regulatory skills. Holmgren et al. 2023. Observing violent television shows, video games, or music can make children become more aggressive. Overall, those who consume more aggressive and violent media tend to display more violent behavior, but this association is complex. Watching a superhero movie may not make all children more aggressive, but it can desensitize viewers to violence. Desensitization occurs when our brains stop reacting and become numb to a certain type of event. Children, teens, and adults who consume more violent media tend to be less reactive to violence and consider it more normative. Children who are desensitized to violence may be more likely to perceive violence and aggression as appropriate and morally justified, particularly if they witness a superhero or favorable character act aggressively. They may then be more likely to act aggressively. However, this is a complex chain reaction of desensitization, normalization, justification, and action. Figure 6.25. Certainly, not everyone who consumes violent media becomes aggressive themselves. Still, some screen time is beneficial. Mobile educational games can be particularly helpful for early development because they can provide portable outlets for creativity, problem-solving, and interactions with others. Watching educational programs alongside a parent or caregiver and discussing what they see can be an especially effective way for children to comprehend new concepts, experiences, and ideas. Sanders et al., 2019. Screens can also help facilitate communication with family who live far away, or to arrange playdates between friends following a move, or, as recently happened during a pandemic, Quinones and Adams, 2020. Using mobile devices to connect with extended family members provides increased emotional attachment, familial bonds, and companionship. Watching educational programming alongside a family member has been tied to preschoolers' improvements in language development, literacy, numeracy, reasoning, and problem-solving. Children's ability to understand satire, metaphors, and hidden morals in stories, to be critical of advertising and marketing in media, and to break down messages and takeaways in film and television can all be enhanced through watching as a family. Children who consume media with a family member may be more likely to become critical thinkers. Hutton et al., 2020. Helping children navigate media usage in early childhood thus requires nuance, because not all media consumption is detrimental. The recommendations for using screens in a healthy way, based on Ponte et al., 2019, can help in early childhood and beyond. Avoid screen time 1 hour before bedtime and do not have screens in children's bedrooms. Co-watch and be present when children are consuming media. Help children ask questions and think critically about what they are viewing, especially advertisements. Encourage screen use that allows for creative, educational interaction rather than passive viewing. Help children pick shows and videos that have positive messages and model age-appropriate behavior. Avoid using the TV for background noise. Encourage and maintain non-screen hobbies and interests.